Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Top 10 Emerging Technologies for the Planet. a session with 4 trailblazers shaping the next chapter of our coexistence with Earth, where innovation becomes restoration. My name is Sally Musa, senior presenter at Forbes Middle East, and it is my honor and pleasure to be the moderator of this incredible session. This meeting couldn't come at a more critical time. The latest World Economic Forum report released just this week tells us that humanity has now breached 7 of the 9 planetary boundaries, from biodiversity loss to nitrogen cycles and now ocean acidification, crossing thresholds that regulate the stability of Earth's life support systems. And so quite simply, we have already exceeded Earth's safe operating space. Yet, the report also spotlights 10 transformative innovations capable of reversing that trend, from green concrete that locks carbon into cities, precision fermentation, creating proteins without livestock, and bidirectional charging that turns every EV into a micro power plant. These are not distant ideas, they are here. They are scaling fast and reshaping the map of global resilience. And today, we are going to be exploring how collaboration across science, policy, and equity can ignite a new era, one where technology serves not just growth, but planetary regeneration. And so to take us through some of these fascinating and promising technologies, I'm excited to be joined by an incredible panel of experts. First, to my left, Yusuf, CEO of LG Sonic from the Netherlands and a young global leader. Welcome. Masami Onoda, Director of International Relations and Research at Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, JAXA. Welcome. Leanne Winoweki, Global Research Leader, Soil and Land Health, World Agroforestry Centre in Kenya. And last but certainly not least, Professor Drew Shindle, Nicholas Professor of Earth Science at Duke University. Welcome. It's fantastic to have you all. And just before we do begin, I would like to take this opportunity to first acknowledge that we have with us Her Highness Sheikh Hasham bin Sultan bin Khalifa Al Nahyan. Welcome, Your Highness. She is, of course, the President and the CEO of the UAE Independent Climate Change Accelerators. It's an honor to have you with us today. Thank you. And so, let's start with where the report begins. And it warns us that remaining within the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold will demand unprecedented technological innovation and rapid adoption. But innovation without access, equity, and financing is simply invention devoid of impact. And so, Professor Shindle, if I can start with you. You've spent decades quantifying how greenhouse gases shape climate systems and climate change. And we often talk about CO2 emissions, but methane is actually 80 times more potent than CO2s, and yet it often slips under the radar. So where do you see the most promising breakthroughs in methane capture and utilization? And what will it take to deploy them at scale?
Thank you, Sally. Yes, it's a great question because methane is both a powerful greenhouse gas and it creates ozone in the lower atmosphere. And ozone is toxic to forests, so it reduces carbon uptake. It's toxic to people. It kills people. And it reduces productivity of our agricultural systems. Altogether, methane is responsible for about 40% as much warming as CO2. So it's a big piece of the puzzle, and it comes from fossil fuels. It comes from waste and it comes from agriculture. And this is one of the things that, to me, is exciting about the new technology report is it spans all of these sectors. What we can see is that there's a lot of unintentional leakage from fossil fuel exploration. And I'm sure we'll hear about this from Massim soon. But one of the breakthroughs has been we can see this now with remote sensing. And when we talk to companies, They don't want to deliberately be having leaky pipelines. They want to go fix them once we can identify these problems. So there, the solutions are often more straightforward. It's detection, there's money available, but then you get to something like agriculture, and we need these precision fermentation. We need new techniques. We need ways to get people to either change their diet, not have so much livestock, like precision fermentation, or we need ways to reduce the methane that comes from these. The waste sector is the final one I'll say a moment about, which is there again, we generate loads and loads of waste, right? We can take organics out of the system. That's another one of the technological breakthroughs is we can turn these organics into useful things like bioplastics, right? Instead of having them degrade in landfills. And at the very least, if we are putting organics into landfills, we can capture the methane that comes out, and that's useful, right? We generate electricity or energy on site for that, and that pays for itself generally. So what we need are these private partnerships, public-private partnerships rather, to get these things, these technologies going, get them more widely scaled up all around the world.
And you bring up a very important point there, because a lot of breakthroughs exist at pilot stage, and then we see very little after that. What is that bridge between laboratory potential and field level deployment, especially in the regions that need it most?
It's a challenge that depends upon the sector, I would say.
Yeah.
Right? And it's really different in between fossil fuels, say, where there's a lot more money already, and something like agriculture. And I think we'll hear in a moment, you know, agricultural policies, they really need to concentrate. They really need to be broad. They need to work on methane, but they need to work on soil carbon, and they would need to work on nitrogen and how much we're fertilizing the system, and if we're getting green ammonia, right, to get the fertilizer, or if we're using traditional fossil fuel-powered ammonia. So I think we really need to tailor the solutions, but solutions do exist for all sectors and all regions.
Lee, let me come to you, because I can see you like just biting at this one. You know, of course, beneath our feet, we have that powerhouse of climate action that is, of course, the soil, but more than a third of the Earth's soil is now degraded. So also speaking to Drew's point there as well, how do we need to go about redesigning soil ecosystems to really capture carbon and methane and enhance food security, among so many other things? Love to hear from you on this.
Thank you so much, Sally, and thanks, Drew, for this nice setup. So what is soil? Soil is the biologically active layer of the Earth's surface. We depend on healthy soil for water regulation, for food and nutrition security. Did you know soil is the most biodiverse ecosystem in the world? In 1 gram of soil, 50,000 species can exist, yet we only know about 1% of what is there. Did you know how important soil is to store what? Carbon. It is an incredibly large carbon sink if we manage it properly. So to your point, you mentioned the food and loss and waste. Taking that and composting it, turning it into a biofertilizer is certainly a solution. And I was very happy to reread the report this morning, highlighting soil as a technological solution. There are many things we can do. Composting, I mentioned. I also mentioned biodiversity. So in the report, it highlights the soil microbiome. So that is the diversity that exists in the soil to basically function, to compost, to sequester carbon, to hold on to water. There are new technologies that exist to actually start understanding the diversity in the soil. And I'd like to just say that yesterday, this week, we launched the first ever Global Future Council on Soil and Land Health. Let's clap for that. It only took 17 years, but we are here, and many members are of the team are in the audience here. One of our members has a startup, Soil Etex, to assess the biodiversity in the soil, because Now we have new technologies, and I think you'll agree, this was not possible 10 years ago, absolutely not possible 20 or 30 years ago. This new technology to really look at the DNA and the genetic and molecular makeup of the soil tells us so much about the biodiversity. So I was very happy soil microbiome was in the report, and I hope everyone will Google what is the soil microbiome and its role.
Absolutely. And I've got to say, that you have to check out the report, but we've given everybody a one-pager that gives you a couple of lines about each of these incredible technologies, as well as the QR code to see the full report. And it's absolutely fantastic and amazing. Masami, if I can come to you now and, to speak to what we've already been hearing, your work at JAXA, literally gives you a bird's eye view of the Earth's changing systems. And in the report, which you are a contributor to, we're identifying next generation Earth observation as a keystone technology that enables everything else, from measuring carbon sinks to monitoring water scarcity. So talk to us about that. Talk to us about what is Earth observation really doing, and what kind of an impact is it going to have?
Wonderful, Sally. Thank you so much. Well, bird's eye probably is a bit lower than where the satellites are.
It's actually a lot more detailed than that. I was amazed by it. Yeah.
Well, probably, and so the satellites are at least a couple hundred kilometers up in the sky, much higher than birds, and that gives us a different perspective. And so what the message I wanted to deliver today to this, with this panel to the audience was that Earth observations, as taken up in this report, not only just allows us to work with all these different areas that we need to look into the planet. We have terabytes, petabytes, as our co-chair Dava Newman yesterday in the panel mentioned. So much information on this planet Earth in so many vast areas. Not just that, but it also, as coined as the blue marble, this perspective shift is probably something that we cannot measure, but that is fundamentally transformative to the way we look at this Earth. So yeah, both those two messages I wanted to deliver to this group, and also how delighted we are to speak about the evolution in this technology, where we, for a very simple example, for instance, measuring CO2, you would have had decades ago, or even methane, humans would have to basically be present there and do their measurements. So there were, before satellites did atmospheric CO2 measurement, about 300 or so observation points worldwide. Now there are tens and even hundreds of thousands of observation points globally, and satellites, unlike humans, don't get really tired. So they tirelessly circle around the world, 90 minutes per circle around the world. To cover the whole world is about 2 weeks. And they would, and with multiple satellites, you can think of the massive amount of information you can collect. Now, yet, how to deliver this to the scientists, to the decision makers that actually need it, will require all of your help. That's my message today.
And you talk about something that is really critical here, because the work that you do touches upon every other sector.
Yes.
In incredible ways. And so how do we make sure that we can collaborate further between space agencies, between governments and climate startups, and democratize that access as well to this vital data, especially for developing nations that are most affected by climate volatility?
Yes. So, for instance, at JAXA, we have a cooperation with JICA, a international development cooperation agency. Their mandate is to work with developing countries, and ours is to build satellites and rockets and launch them and operate them. If we work together, we can use both strengths, and this is the strength of partnership that dramatically changed the way since the 10 years that we've had this agreement to collaborate, that we work with countries in Asia, in Africa, in South America also, in many, many ways to work with them.
Speaking of partnerships, this is something that you're very good at, Yusuf. At LG Sonic, you've really pioneered smart water technologies using sound waves and data analytics as well to purify large-scale water bodies. It's an incredible blend of both science and sustainability. And in the report, we're talking about regenerative desalination and modular geothermal. They are amongst the top 10 innovations. And so from your vantage point, how do you see these new water and energy systems turning climate stress into opportunity, particularly in regions like this, like the Middle East and Africa?
Thank you, Sally. So first of all, let's zoom out.
Yeah.
We are here talking about 10 technologies. We have a lot of technologies available, and we have a lot of problems. The key is not finding just a new technology. The key is how to scale it. So if you take a look at my company, when about 12 years ago, I had this crazy idea to use ultrasound, which is a technology invented for many applications, even knowing the gender of the baby. And I wanted to use the same ultrasound to kill the algae in large water surfaces. And I thought once we will prove it, the world will welcome us and we could scale easy. But it was not the case. It took us about 5 years after the research and the development to be able to go from a pilot to, at this moment, active in 69 countries, 5 offices around the world. So the question is, why was it so hard to scale the technology? Because again, there are enough technologies around the world. And what is so interesting in the report, they are talking about technologies which are at scale already. Because once you will scale a technology, you will create the impact. And again, the question is, why is it so hard to scale innovation, and specifically green tech innovation? And I'm writing a book about it, so I'm not going to summarize the whole book, but, but it comes to a couple of things. First of all, we have enough money in the world, but we don't have enough money to de-risk the technologies. Going from a pilot to a large scale, that means a big risk. So the banks are not there to finance this kind of innovation. So we need to be innovative at financing. And to do so, there are many good examples, but one of them is the Invest International. It's a Dutch bank owned by the government, where they will give a grant. Part of the total project finance is a grant. And they will tell the public sector, you don't worry about the grant. If the project will not work, we will cover that loss. But on the other hand, like the 50% of the rest of the project, it needs to come from the private sector. And that's an interesting approach, because once you will de-risk it, there will be enough banks willing to invest in that project. And that's one part of blended finance, what they will call it. And in the report, they call about it. So innovation need not to be only in the technology. I love technology. We are using remote sensing to monitor the water surfaces. We have algorithm and AI to predict the water quality, and we use ultrasound. So it's all about technology. But it's not the technology which creates the impact, it's the scale.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting to hear that and to think about, okay, we need to be thinking about less about the risk of the project and the opportunities, and to cover possible failures along the way to make sure that we get to making sure that we do scale it. How do you feel like we need to create, do we need to create a pipeline that connects local innovation ecosystems with global capital and policy frameworks that really, takes those great ideas that there are so many of and helps to take them to that next stage and to scale them?
So to do so, we need to cut the scaling in different phases. So the first phase is an interesting phase. It's a phase where you will give some money to researchers, where they will come up with a breakthrough technology, they will patent it, and then we will have it at laboratory scale. That's well organized, most part of the world. Then from the laboratorium to the pilot, there are some funds. Like we are talking about 100,000, 200,000 euro funds, which you will be able to create the scale. Then it's the most important phase, which is taking it from a pilot to a large scale. And over there, we will need organization first to get the end user with the technology. And one of the organizations here in the Emirates is an organization run by Her Excellency Sheikh Shamma. It's an incredible, very good organization where they are going to match the need of the local climate needs to potential good technologies. So you will need the enablers within the ecosystem to be able to create it. And then you will need, again, you need to have risk finance.
Yeah.
So at the European Innovation Council, it's a 10 billion euro program where I'm in the board. What we do over there is we invest 2.5 million in deep tech startups as a grant, just to get them from a pilot to a large scale. And once they will do that, the European Commission will become a partner, like a shareholder in that company, and they will invest between 50 million to 55 million. And that's European Commission becoming a shareholder in a deep tech startup. That's what it takes to take a startup from a pilot to a large scale.
Yeah. Professor Schindel, I'd love to hear from you and the other panel members on this, because I feel like it's such a critical point when we're talking about, you know, taking something that is a pilot and scaling it up. In terms of the role of policy and investment, from your perspective for the technologies that you're looking at, what is their role there in making sure that we do transform these pilots into climate action?
Yeah, again, I think this depends a lot on the particular sector you're targeting, because they're so different from each other, especially for something like methane. And as you noted before, right, it used to fall through the cracks, right? Because it's both part of clean air and it's climate, but it's not the most important in either. So I work a lot with the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, which is trying to bridge this gap, and we released a report in 2021. And unlike most reports, it didn't just sit on the wall for once. And there is a global methane pledge was launched that same year. We now have over 150 countries, and it includes financing. But that's really one of the key questions. Where do you direct the financing? The oil and gas companies don't need financing. They have trillions of dollars, right? They need regulations saying use the technology, and it can get done. But for some things like municipal waste, right, in developing countries, you often do need financing. So the pledge was launched with hundreds of millions of dollars of funding, in part to support research accelerators for technology in sectors where it wasn't so present, like the fermentation, precision fermentation in this report, but also to really learn what was needed in some cases. And composting came up before, right? One of the things there is you can give money, you can fund a composting project, and you can say, oh, this worked really poorly, we're not going to do this again. But it turns out sometimes the reason it worked poorly was because it didn't have a really kind of a design that took into account human behavior. And simple things like putting the compost bin closer than the trash bin really affects how effective these things are. And so sometimes we really just, it's not always a question of money, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. It really depends on the sector. But policies can be put in place. All of the pledge countries are now working on roadmaps to meet this target, to pull down the rate of warming in the near term, which methane is the strongest leverage for that. And what they're doing is trying to put in money into those areas where it's really needed, including to maybe backstop some of the risk that's being taken when private sector go in. So a no-interest loan, a loan for something like landfill waste capture, landfill methane capture, which will pay for itself in profits, but it still takes upfront capital. So we'll give you money and you give it back later. This way you don't have to use the city's money. That's just an example.
I love that, and thank you for highlighting that it's not always about the money, but I feel like the money could go towards the research to figuring out
Yes.
how best to deploy these technologies, and even what you already have to make it work better. Lee, I can see you wanting to answer this one as well. Yeah, please. I'd love to hear your perspective on this.
Absolutely. So as you introduced me, I'm a scientist. I'm a soil scientist, and I'm based in Nairobi, Kenya. I also co-founded the Coalition of Action for Soil Health as part of the UN Food System Summit in 2021 to really scale up the advocacy of the importance of soil health.
Yes.
And why did I do that? I did that because we must translate science into action. We cannot have reports or journal articles or data sitting collecting dust. We need to translate science into action. And one example I have, and I'll link it to the remote sensing, in 2005, we started a systematic monitoring protocol for soil health in Mali. 20 years later, we have scaled this soil health, vegetation diversity, and land degradation monitoring to 46 countries, 300 landscapes. Investing in this technology and this monitoring has been critical because now we have the field data, as she mentioned. You start with the field data to then calibrate these models with Earth observation. We can create soil carbon maps, 90% accurate, soil erosion maps, tree cover maps. We're even working on species, trees and grasses, to really scale this technology. And yes, you only took 5 years, I'm talking about 20 years. And many people are investing in this. So that is very important. But then how do we use this to bring the evidence to policymakers, to the financiers, to de-risk, to implementation? So we are very lucky. As I said, I'm based in Nairobi. Last year, we launched the Africa Fertilizer and Soil Health Action Plan, and then later we have the Kampala Declaration, where countries have committed to invest in soil health, develop national policies, and strengthen their soil information systems. I think it's all related, these investments, the tireless action. Now policymakers, finance organizations, and farmers are actually using these data and scaling soil health.
I think the more we look at across these sectors and we look at this report, we realize how much everything is incredibly interrelated. Masami, if I can come to you again, thinking from that point of view of finance, from your perspective, what do you feel needs to change so that we can really tap into the incredible potential of what you're seeing?
These are all so deep and challenging discussions. But what I every day think is that, what we have today, let's start from there. We used to, in the 1950s, 60s maybe, the first remote sensing, which is the technology used for Earth observation. It's also, our eyes are doing remote sensing all the time because it's seeing and measuring something without touching it, right? Mm-hmm. So, and our eyes adopt the light spectrum. Then there's the electromagnetic spectrum that's ultraviolet to much, much longer, to very, very various features can be observed by that, from tree canopies to vegetation, how healthy they are, rice crop, agriculture, water, floods, and the cluster movement of Earth even, and volcanoes, earthquakes, therefore. So all of this we can today, now coming fast forwarding and coming to what we have today, we can have petabytes of data put together, visualized, and ready there for everybody to access through, if you have internet, through that, and for each of the areas here to work with. And I think there are investments coming for this type of effort, and we're talking about ESGs, we're talking about TCFDs, TET, and FDs, and all of these. Financing means, which still needs to really come together to make the use of this. And this is kind of where I have to always stop because there hasn't been a big breakthrough where we can really utilize effectively, apart from doing these pilot projects and scaling them up, as you said. And also, the investment requires return, therefore it has to make money, basically. And then for methane, for instance, the type of methane data that makes money, that has a market, it's very spot, because you need a customer. So the customer will need to know where the methane leaks are, and then the customer would pay you for that. And then you have a business and you have investment. But for global CO2, for global methane, for years of observation, historic observation for that, how do you finance that? Those are the questions swirling around myself and every day struggling to solve.
Indeed, it's a critical question.
Honest.
Thinking long term, it is critical to all of these challenges, and we can't meet that challenge without it. Something that is also very important. We really live in an age where everybody talks about sustainability, green sells everything, and so greenwashing can definitely erode the very trust that these innovations are depending on. So how can we make sure that we do set science-based metrics and transparent standards to make sure that these emerging technologies actually really truly deliver on measurable results? Yusuf.
Okay.
It's a kind of question for all of you, but I would give it to you first.
Yeah, as a businessman, I will say the market will verify it. So if the technology is working, then you will see it scaling and succeeding. If the technology will not work, you can have a lot of scientific reports to greenwash it, but still it will have zero impact on the market on the long term. So I will say that's one thing. But coming back to the scaling aspect, why is it hard, right? And I mentioned in the beginning of the session, another point from an entrepreneurial perspective. You have 3 unknowns you have to overwin before you will be able to scale largely. The first one is an unknown technology. So once you will start a business, you will go to the market, no one knows your technology. So everyone will think, if the people will know the technology, then it's not an innovation, it's just an improvement of the current technology. So innovation, per definition, it will be like breakthrough technology. So no one knows the technology, you need to prove it. And then no one knows your company, you are a startup. It's not like Google coming up with a new innovation. No, it's some Yusuf with the LG Sonic, no one's heard him or his company. And then he's saying ultrasound will break through, is a breakthrough technology to control the algae. So that's the second unknown. And the third one, most of the startups entrepreneurs, they don't know the supply chain and the legal framework in the market. So when we started with the company, we thought like that the water utilities will jump once they will hear about the technology. But they had long-term contracts with the chemical companies. And it was all based on every 2 months, some chemical company will come and will throw something into the water, copper sulfate or something like that. And then they will move on. So we had to wait till that this kind of contracts also will end. And I mean, if you will be able to win these 3 unknown, then you will be able to scale it. But the numbers are very bad. So from the 10 companies with breakthrough technologies, only 2 will survive. To put that in perspective, if you will go and do skydiving, and I will tell, let's the 10 of us do skydiving, and only 2 parachutes will open. I would like to know who will jump. But still, there are some crazy entrepreneurs willing to go into the innovation and entrepreneurship. But those are the real numbers, and cost a lot of money to start a company and to scale it. So we need to understand this innovation roadmap, so we will be able to support them, so they will be able to scale and have serious impact.
It's a vital perspective from on the ground, somebody who's built it from the the ground up and understanding the challenges. They're incredible. And thank you for that illustration, that fatal illustration, in fact. I'd love to now open up the floor for questions for our panel. Please do hold your hand up. Yes, we have microphones coming round. Yes, please.
Session, Amanda Ellis with the New Carbon Economy Consortium. I want to ask, when you say 90% accuracy now for soil mapping, is this in terms of carbon sequestered in the soil? Can you do carbon credits with it, for example? Sounds fascinating.
Thank you so much for the question. Absolutely. I'm going to weave in your question about evidence-based metrics, and I think it's very important because there has been so much greenwashing, especially around the carbon market, soil carbon, that now finally they are really investing in the monitoring. We did an assessment. It's like less than 1% of the whole value chain in carbon in markets is on monitoring. So we're not, even scratching the surface of what needs to be done. So yes. Now we are doing quite a few projects where we do the scientific baseline for about 5 projects in East Africa with Vera and the new digital soil mapping tool that was just released this year. And it is 90% accurate on the validation. So not even the calibration, the validation. So it's really important that we use science-based metrics, that we translate the science again into action so that we can really avoid the greenwashing and provide real evidence. So we ground truth with soil spectroscopy. So I think you were looking for mid-infrared on that spectrum, and it's $10.50 per sample. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Professor Paul Freeman from Imperial College, and I'm part of the Generative Bio Future Council. I just want, which is actually a technology that can address all of the different areas that we were talking about. One of the things I wanted to ask you was about the scale-up problem, because as a businessman, Yusuf, you said very clearly that the market will tell you which technology will work. And then if you listen to Sylvia Earle's dialogue yesterday, you'll realize that the time left for us to wait for an emerging technology to solve some of our existential problems is actually quite limited. So how do we solve that conundrum between allowing what we all work in, the capital markets and all the rest of it, and also the idea that we don't have a lot of time to start getting these technologies actually scaled and working in the real world, which is all of us want?
Such a good question. It's 2 kinds of innovation. We need innovation in procurement. So if you would take a look at the tender procedures, they are not made for breakthrough innovation. They are not made for scaling technologies. They are made for a technology which is already proven 20 years ago. So innovation in the procurement process. The other one is innovation in the finance. We need to understand the risk. We need to cut them in pieces, and each one we need to give it a different finance. And the report mentioned also the blended finance. It's key in our access to deep tech innovation.
Thank you.
So this is Vinayak from Data Security Council of India. My question is the volume of fund, right? So for example, take an AI an example. So one geography is talking about $3 trillion bet they are taking on AI. On the other side, we have one geography which talks about government investment that much of money, basically. So the big bets now getting concentrated only few geographies with such a big financial muscle with them, basically. Right? So what about other geographies, basically, which seems to be, there seems to be widening gap in terms of how much bet that you can take on technology research?
Yep, great question.
Other geographies for investments?
Yes, exactly. Looking at those who are smaller economies, that because it's kind of going to that question of 70% of climate funding is going to the larger economies. What about the smaller economies? What about smaller businesses? What about that kind of investment? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have a great answer for that question because, I mean, like we said, the way you want to follow the market, and of course it's harder to get that market returning your funds for your investment. So I mean, one of the ways I think that there is a possibility is in some of the smaller economies there is still, especially in smaller developing economies, that is, development finance institutions which are bringing money from Asian Development Bank, Inter-American Development Bank, et cetera. they bring a good deal of investment income. And I think that their traditional way of looking at things is, if we're going to take into account the climate at all, or the environment at all, it's maybe what's the total CO2 emissions associated with energy. But soil carbon isn't part of it. Methane and nitrous oxide and the other greenhouse gases aren't part of it. So I think one of the things we can do is try to align this existing large flow of development assistance with the kind of principles that we understand, we really shouldn't be just looking at total CO2 emissions from energy, but we need to look at the whole spectrum of impacts, and that includes things that are complicated, like the agricultural system, right? There's huge amounts of money already flowing to make sure that food productivity is adequate, including all of that money that's embodied in the nitrogen fertilizers that go to different countries. And there's a way to use that nitrogen more efficiently and spend less money, divert some of that existing flow into more sustainable uses. That's the best thing that I can think of at the moment.
Thank you. Yes, next.
Thank you so much. I'm so impressed by all of you, and thank you for your story. It's a journey. Helle Bang Jorgensen from Board Intelligence. I work with board of directors all over the world. And my question, and might actually goes to the question that was due, how do you get your business, your insight in front of board of directors so they can invest? Because that's, you talked about Google, and they might do in innovation too, but there's a lot of companies that's actually looking for innovation and don't know about what you're doing.
Yeah, would you like to go for it? Yeah.
So I can share from my own experience. So as an entrepreneur, the first thing you will think, if I will speak with the CEO, that's key, but it's not true. So key is first, go and speak with the innovation manager. Most of the corporates, they have an innovation department. The innovation department, they are allowed to make mistakes. They are made to make the mistakes. So from the 10, if they will just choose 2 technologies, that will be great. But if you are talking about the operational managers, they are not allowed to make the mistakes. So if you will go to the CEO and he will send you directly to the operation manager, and your technology will be implemented, and during the pilot something will be wrong, your technology will be blacklisted in the company. So because the operational managers are not allowed to make the mistakes. So I think that's the first thing from entrepreneurial perspective. Who do you speak with? Definitely not the CEO, not the operation. Go to the innovation manager. From corporate perspective, it's be easy on the entrepreneurs, because they will expect. I call it most of the time when I'm talking about the corporate with the startups corporation. I call it like a forced marriage. They don't like each other. They don't speak the same language, but they have to cooperate. The corporates, they need the speed of innovation the startups have, and they need that breakthrough technology, but they don't want to risk their reputation. And to do so, they need to implement large amount of money in the innovation department, which are they willing to lose, because they will lose about 80% of it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that question. And I'm afraid we are out of time with this incredible panel. Each of the 10 innovations that we see in this report that are outlined there, they really do show enormous opportunity and a pathway back to balance. And it's a proof that technology, when it's guided by equity, finance, I feel like that was the central crux of what we were talking about today, and policy, it can really heal every system and sustain life on Earth. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking our panel of speakers. And thank you to all of you for being with us today. Thank you.